I'm so excited to be here with y'all, and I can't wait to dive into this topic. And I wanted to go through a few things that I've had to structure this a little bit differently because so many of you have signed up. But I'm going to keep it to 30 minutes because I know that we all have lots to do, and we all might be doing something else right now. So I just want to welcome all of you who are watching today. And then also some of you might be watching the replay. Over 500 of you have signed up for this. So I've had to structure the Q&A a little differently. So I want to hear your thoughts on this topic. So please do use the chat as we go along. I will be saving all those questions. We may do another one of these. I may write a blog post about it. I don't really know what I'll do next with that, but I want to hear what this sparks in you as we talk about this. So just grab something to write with, or if you're multitasking, just listen and you can watch the replay. You'll get it to your inbox and you can share it. So as we are going through how this is going to work, I already went through a few of these. So the Q&A details that I wanted to share that's going to be structured a little differently. If you got my email yesterday, I asked you to submit a question beforehand. Because there's so many of you, I want to make sure that I organize those. So I'm going to get to some of those pre-submitted questions at the Q&A at the end. But again, please put your thoughts or questions in the chat and for future connections that we can make and for presentations that I can make. So this weekend, you'll get the replay and feel free to share it with anyone who missed this or forward it on. It probably, I can't actually remember, but it's going to be available over the weekend, I think until Sunday night. So you have the weekend to watch it. And so let's dive in. So who am I? Some of you know who I am, and some of you maybe have just found my work for the first time, but I'm Dr. Emily King, and I'm a child psychologist and former school psychologist. I've been working with probably over the years, hundreds of neurodivergent kids. I started my career in public schools, and I've been in private practice for about 13 years. So I've seen all sides of this process. And I just know that neurodivergent kids are anxious. They're growing up in a world that's not built for them. And we are partnering with them along this journey. So I'm really passionate about helping parents and teachers better understand our kids. So I've been featured in the New York Times and Washington Post and got the thrill of being interviewed live once on MSNBC. I was so excited that they wanted to ask me about that particular piece was about ADHD in young boys going to kindergarten. So I love it when the media asks me these questions. You know, some of my colleagues shy away from the media. We're very much trained for therapy to be a very confidential practice, which it is and still is. But I feel so passionate about getting quality information out there. We need community as parents raising neurodivergent kids. And I want all of us to keep working alongside our kids. I see them work so hard in therapy, and there's a limit to that. There's a limit to what they can achieve without the community of all of us around them, understanding them and working together. So I just feel like there's even more that we can do to help them learn and grow. So that's why I'm just so passionate about this. So my why is that I'm also a parent raising neurodivergent kids. I was a psychologist before I had kids, so the universe is just interesting. I think we all have a story like that. And I truly believe our kids are sparking change and demanding changes in relationships, changes in education, changes in the medical model of how we view things. And we can help them by understanding who they are, accepting them for who they are, and then helping others understand who they are. A little story about my family is that I have one very not so loving social situations child and one very social child who's never met a stranger. And, my oldest prefers to stay inside and likes to be close to us. And he, has to have plans made for him to get exercise. Whereas my youngest has never met a stranger, wants to be in charge of most things, and would probably live outside if we let him. And so one day my oldest started noticing that my youngest, is inviting like all the neighborhood kids to the house all the time, which is not at all something that he would have done when he was younger. And without hesitation and with true sincerity, he just said, "Why do you like people so much?" And so he genuinely was perplexed and curious why his little brother just liked people so much. So my youngest just said, "I just do." And so in that moment, I realized that some of the just the norm that we have set in our family of neurodiversity, everybody has their thing, likes their thing. Nothing is less than or better than, it's just different. And that's what I want to help everyone strive for. Is that other kids, when they see differences, they're just curious, maybe perplexed and confused, but they're curious and they want to learn more, not have a judgmental feeling about it. So I know some of you are already probably feeling like you may have had this conversation with your child and may have made a mistake or may have said something that you felt like was wrong or made them feel vulnerable. Just know that this is not just one conversation in talking to your child. We keep coming back to these conversations to help them with new ideas at different ages, at different developmental stages. And admitting that we're still learning is going to model growth for them. So just keep that in mind. Okay. So I love this quote, and I want this to, kind of be the vibe for our time together this morning of, I know the unknown path of this parenting journey creates anxiety. I will also say that the unknown path is full of hope and surprises. We have to let go of what we thought our plan was for our child, and it's not our path, it's their path, and we have the privilege of helping them find their way. This is, of course, true of all parenting, of all raising kids. But if you're raising a kid with various challenges, asynchronous learning that's not fitting into the mold, we get to this mindset shift faster than a lot of other parents. And so I want us to just keep remembering that. And also, I didn't mention, but just so you know the context, my boys now are 10 and 16 years old. So that's where I am on my parenting journey. So a quick word about diagnostic labels before we dive into this. So as you probably know, no two children with the same diagnostic label or the same special education classification are the same. Labels are helpful for access to services when children are young. And then again, when children start to identify as an autistic person or a person with ADHD or having anxious temperaments. We want to be able for our kids to find their people, to find people who share similarities with them. So this will ebb and flow over time, and you'll figure out as I go on that this is less about talking about the actual wording of the label, although that is culturally the words that we have to label it. It's more about helping kids understand their strengths and their needs for support so they can advocate for themselves. Okay, so let's dive in. So why do we need to talk to our kids about their brain? So our kids are not broken. You know this, but the world does not know this. And we don't want them to feel this way. So it can lead to negative outcomes in terms of their mental health and in terms of feeling lonely when they really need support and community the most. And so they're not living in a world, or probably at times may not be in a classroom or a school that is built for them. And so they're going to notice these differences. And without explaining how their brain works and why they're feeling those differences, they may make assumptions about being less than. So we have an opportunity to explain different does not mean less than. When we take that piece out of worrying about what people think or worrying if we're not good enough, we can help our kids. We can spend our energy and help our kids spend their energy on helping them be who they are already. And I can't tell you how much I've seen kids blossom over the years when they accept themselves, their family accepts them, they are in a classroom that is a good fit for them, their teacher gets them, when their mental health and mood improves and they just can spend their energy and their interest in working on things that are hard for them, but they are motivated to improve, that's when we see better outcomes for our kids. Okay, so that's the why, but when do we have this conversation? So the first thing I want you to know is that this is never just one conversation. So it's similar to teaching our kids about their sexual health. We don't load them up with this information all at one time and then never talk about it again. Our kids are going through developmental stages where they're going to understand some things in a simple, concrete way, and then it's going to get more elaborate, and then situations will happen over time where they will understand things in a different way. So there's really not one age that I can say this is it. And there's really not one even developmental time that I can say this is it. They're all in their own time frame, as you know. But what I can say is that there's a huge range to this. I've worked with families who feel like their 4-year-old is ready to talk about their brain in very specific, concrete terms. And I've worked with families who don't feel like their child is ready until they're closer to 10. One thing that I can differentiate for you is that I've noticed over time that there really are these two categories of timing from your child's perspective. There's the category of before your child even has heard of these terms, even has a perception of what a diagnosis means, and then after. So we're going to talk about the differences in your child's perception. Those parenting tweens and teens, your child probably has autistic friends or knows kids with ADHD. They have heard these words before, and they may already have a picture or a loose definition in their mind of what this is. That's going to be a different conversation based on their perception than when you're coming at this from before they know anything. You have the opportunity to frame it in the way that you want to. And neither one is, going to be better or worse. If you have the opportunity, like if you feel like, I think I have a window of time before my child has a negative interpretation of what disability is, sooner is better. But you can always talk with kids about what they are feeling, what they know, and we're going to get into all of that. So I want you to think about, has your child heard of these terms? So where to start is just to ask them, what do they already know about ADHD, autism, or learning differences? You can ask, have you ever heard these words, autism or ADHD? Or do you know anybody who's autistic? Just kind of throw it out there as you're curious about it. If you feel like that would be something that would be helpful to your child, it might be that that's all you say in this first conversation. You're gauging their awareness. You're planting seeds to figure out how they respond to that, to figure out if it's a big deal or a negative thing to them. And it's helping you gauge where you go next with this. So is their perception positive or negative? Kids are much more evolved actually than we are, and they talk about these things when they're young pretty openly, like so-and-so has ADHD too, cool, and so we have to not make assumptions that, it's how we felt about something as a kid. If their perception is negative, if they've had an experience or, they've read something or seen something that's negative, we may end up using the actual terminology less often in conversation and lean more into the strengths and needs, the specific things that they're experiencing until they're older and they can come to terms with how they want to identify with their disability. We're going to talk more about this in the Q&A at the end, because I'm going to get more into how to talk to teens about this. So also remember, let's assume that your child hasn't heard the diagnosis yet, the terms yet. You can set the tone for this. So you've asked them if they've ever heard of these words or if they know anyone who's autistic. And then you've started to notice what they comment about. So think about, what have they noticed is hard for them? What have they noticed? I think I can remember stuff better than you can, what have they noticed is different? Listen for that, note their perspective, because that's going to be your jumping off point for helping them know that this constellation of traits has a name. So when they begin doubting themselves or engaging in negative self-talk, it's definitely time to have this conversation, because you don't want them to start thinking, I'm just not working hard enough. I'm just not trying hard enough. Something is wrong with me. It's not because they're not trying hard enough. It's because their brain needs some support that they're not getting in some way, or they have strengths that are not being capitalized on. So think through your child's readiness for some of those conversations as you're deciding when to talk to them. Okay, so the how of this. So think about, if you are going to be initiating this conversation, think about a moment where your child has plenty of time to access you for the rest of the day for questions, or has plenty of time to process this information and has some downtime. So often, weekend mornings are a great time to talk to kids. And so many times this conversation is way shorter than you think it's going to be. And it's built up in your mind. And they sometimes are like, okay, cool. Thanks for explaining that to me. And then sometimes they may have questions. But highly anxious children, usually school days when they're tired or right before bed is not usually the best time, because they're about to separate from you and we don't want them to be alone with their questions. And so think about a time where they have access to you and you can support them moving forward. Visuals are a great way to dive into this if you have time to sit down and you're not, riding around in the car. Again, going back to point 2 here is your child may jump into this conversation anytime. They may hop into the car after school and be like, hey, somebody in class said that they have ADHD. It kind of sounds like me. Is that true? And you may jump right into it with them, and that's totally fine. It's better for you just to go with it because they're ready. They're primed. They're ready to talk about it. And the more kind of chill you can be about it, as it's just like a thing, yep, this is true, let's talk about it, the more chilled they can be about it. But if you are sitting down and you feel like I need a visual, many of our kids are very visual learners and need time to visually process things when language is hard for them. You want to think through what kind of visual would work for them. I love using a Venn diagram, and inside my parent course, I have an example of that where you kind of talk about these are the characteristics of communication that you need support on, or these are the areas of sensory that are overwhelming. And then this is the part of your brain that's like highly perceptive and notices everything or remembers everything. And you can do that better than I can. So using a visual can sometimes help you organize yourself, but also helps them process those things. So once you and your child are kind of talking about the characteristics of things, so you want to start with that. So you're not even talking about necessarily the label yet, but you remember you've noticed what your child is noticing, and you're starting to talk through, okay, you know how like sometimes it's hard to make friends, or sometimes you get overwhelmed with fire drills, or you have trouble controlling your body or paying attention. So you're already talking about laying the foundation for the traits that they're feeling like are a part of them. And then also you can share, there are also some things that you might notice you're better at than your friends or your siblings or your parents. And when you're in agreement with explaining all those things, then you can dive in to what you're going to say next. So once they've acknowledged that those things are true about them, and this is where it gets tricky with teenagers, because they may say like, that's not me. So, because teenagers argue with us about a lot of things. And so this part may not work as well with teenagers. And I'll address that a little later on. But if your child is like, yeah, that's true about me, then you can say a little bit more about their brain. So for instance, if they have a memory of going to see a psychologist or doing some testing with an OT or an SLP, you can say something like, when you went to play with Dr. Emily and she asked you some questions and gave you some activities to do, well, she's helped us figure out that you have an autistic brain or you have an ADHD brain. That means that you're really good at list all the traits, and it also means that you need extra help or extra practice learning, list all the things. And they are like, okay, which means that then you can go into explaining what they're good at, what they need support with. And what I think is really important here is then expanding it beyond the child. So explain to them what they can do that you can't do. I'll never forget when one of my sons, who is really into calendars and can memorize dates and can tell you like what day of the week a certain date is on in 1985, like my brain can't do that. One day he found this website called timeanddate.com. And he ran in so excited and he was like, Mom, this is what the inside of my brain looks like. And he felt so seen. And I was like, let me see, because my brain doesn't look like that inside. And still to this day, we joke about like when I go to the dentist and can't remember 6 months ago when I was there, he remembers. So things like that are little nuanced things that maybe we don't think much about, but are a huge deal for a kid who might feel throughout their week that they don't know things at school or in social situations, but then they do when we have these moments with them. The other thing that you can help expand beyond the child is to help them connect this with something you relate to. So, of course, many parents I work with are also neurodivergent. So many people in my generation may not have been tested, may have gone through school thinking this is hard for me and I don't really know why. And you may be beginning to realize, I think I have some of these traits. So even though it may not be named, you may not be tested and diagnosed, it doesn't really matter. In that moment, you can say, you know what, it is hard for me to remember stuff too. So this is the strategy I use to do that. And then your child feels validated and seen and just not alone is the most important thing. So think about this conversation as just the first step. So it's going to be the first step of many conversations you have. You want to just get so comfortable with it. If they do jump in the car at carpool and have another question, you can just talk about it like anything else. If your child is ready for more, now again, some will just be like, okay, cool. Thanks for explaining that to me. Some may not say anything at all and be quiet and you're worried. Just give them time to process and be available for questions and know that all reactions are okay. And so if your child, though, is ready for more, you can then talk next about the people in their life who also already understand their brain. So you may have already explained privately to teachers or therapists or family members that this is what's going on with your child's development so that they can be helpful. And your child might feel really excited to know, oh, so they know about this. They're a safe person for me to talk to. They will feel better to know that there's already a community around them. And then if they want more, you can go into identifying strategies that might work for them. So is there a sensory sensitivity that you have figured out? So you know how you wear headphones during fire drills. That is helpful for you. And the reason that some other kids don't wear headphones is that that's not something that's hard for them, but they also can't do things that you can do. So you're talking through ways that you probably have already been advocating for them, but you're kind of pulling back the curtain on this is why I've been doing those things. And this is how you can start learning to advocate for yourself. And then you make that connection as they get older, you're starting to pass the baton to them to start advocating for yourself. So sometimes you don't even need to plan much at all. And so sometimes kids will come home and say, hey, somebody in my class said something about autism or ADHD. I think that sounds like me. And then that's the beginning of it. So just be prepared to be unprepared, although you can, stay with these comments that I'm making today and think them through with your child in mind. So to summarize this, just to keep us organized, identify the start point that you want your child to think through. So you're going to have to think through, where are they starting from? Do they know about the diagnostic term or they don't? Note the traits that your child is noticing, both strengths and need for support. And that's your jumping off point with explaining that there's a name for this. And once we understand our brain, we can ask people for what we need. So this conversation, of course, will evolve over time and kids are going to pick up on our emotions. So you can start today, though, with just keeping track of what your child is noticing in terms of both their strengths and their needs, and think through how their strengths and needs relate to the diagnostic term you think will work for them and moving forward when it feels right. Okay, y'all, I can't fit any more into 30 minutes to keep it at 30 minutes. So I did want to add to how you can keep learning with me. There's so much to cover. And 3 years ago, gosh, it's almost more than 3 years ago, during COVID, when I wasn't seeing a lot of families because so many of my families are play-based, which didn't quite work over telehealth, I created a parent course and I've revised it this year so that parents beyond my psychology practice can keep learning with me. It's based on the most frequently asked questions I get from parents in my psychology practice right after the diagnosis, and also moving into shifting their mindset as they are learning to parent this child, not necessarily how they were parented. And I added more this year to the course update to include teens. I walk you through how to read a psych report because I know that it's hard to get that information. And if you are in a diagnostic feedback session, sometimes you're feeling overwhelmed and you realize, I don't think I was listening to anything the psychologist said. So it takes time going through that. In the course, we talk about understanding how emotions and behaviors are connected, and then how setting limits is different with neurodivergent kids. It's a little more nuanced. So just to let you know, these are the 6 lessons. They're each just 30 minutes because I know 30 minutes is kind of all we got most of the time, of understanding them, shifting our mindset, how emotions are connected with learning, figuring out what's going on behind behaviors, the art of setting limits, and then building a community and helping everyone else embrace your child. So the course is usually $397, but everybody gets a coupon code today for coming to this at $297. So just use that 100 off at checkout if you want to keep learning with me. And I hope that you think through all the things that are coming to your mind right now, because most of them are answered in the course. And thinking also about the things that you need to have just kind of in your back pocket as things change. So the course, once you have it, it's always available to you. You can go back and listen to it years later that your child might be at a different age. There's some downloadable worksheets like that Venn diagram I mentioned before to help you map things out. So I feel like, as you know, when I look at children over time and I notice when their parents understand them and they're starting to feel that they are ready to, share who they are and everyone around them understands. I truly believe with the right information for parents, you can shift your perspective on parenting and then think about helping your child be less anxious and more hopeful on their unique journey. So that's why I do this work. Okay, so I know one of the most common questions has been, what in the world do we do with our teenagers? Maybe a late diagnosis or a kid who just doesn't want to listen to us talk about this. We are almost at 10:30, but if you can stay, I'm going to stay for 5 or 10 more minutes and answer these questions. But I understand if you have to hop off or put an additional question in the chat and I'll review it later. So this question came from many of you. What if they already have a negative idea about what autism is? And so this happens because our culture has a variety of different ways of explaining this. And it's really hard sometimes to undo a teenager's perspective on something. They're often not open to learning from us, especially. And we have to be careful about the things that we say. And I know this is a time of parenting that feels like you're not able to get in with them in terms of explaining something. So what I would suggest is that whatever is triggering them, like they may not like the terminology or whatever words are matching with what they don't like or their negative perception, just kind of drop that language for now and focus on what they are identifying as being hard. So is it hard to get up in the morning? Is it hard to make a friend? Is it hard to ask the teacher for help? Whatever they would agree with you on as being the trait that's hard. Or is there something that they're good at that no one ever asks about, like an interest that they have? So think through those things and start there and helping your child understand who they are. And then as they get older, they're going to learn culturally what all these terms mean. They're going to find their people, and hopefully they will, interact with people who have a variety of different, and think about who they're around, a variety of different learning styles, or if they're connecting with people that you feel like are really good influences and kind of normalizing. We all learn in different ways. Just think about who they're around and think about what they're involved in, because teenagers learn best from their communities. And sometimes teenagers' communities are their interests because they have weaknesses in social skills and like to be close to home, but they love their interests. So they may connect with people on their interests as well. Okay, so what if my child is using, let's say, ADHD as an excuse to not do stuff? So this is often a common question I get of like, I don't want to tell them they have ADHD because then they're going to say, I can't do that because I have ADHD, and it's going to become a crutch. So I would say the benefits of knowing your diagnosis and understanding your brain far outweigh the risks of using it as an excuse. Yes, some kids are going to use it as an excuse, but this is what we do about that. So if a child is using it as an excuse, you have to be pretty solid on their skills. And this is where teacher-parent collaboration is really helpful. Can they do it at school but not at home? Or can they do it at home and not at school? If a skill is emerging or you know they can do it and it's not really related to their weakness or their diagnosis, again, you can de-emphasize the language or the label and just talk about the thing. So yes, this ADHD makes remembering your belongings hard, but I think you can do it if we have a checklist. So you're going back to the skill and building the skill of you're not going to let them kind of get away with not doing the thing because of ADHD. Like, yes, you have ADHD, but that doesn't mean we don't work on our skills. It just means we need a strategy for those skills and probably extra practice. My last question is, what if my child is not yet ready to understand their diagnosis, but I need to tell others so others understand? I feel like this is betraying my child's trust. So this goes back to in the conversation when your child is starting to understand their diagnosis, and then you're also going to tell them these are the people who already know about your diagnosis. And some kids will feel like, I can't believe you told them and you didn't tell me. Some kids won't, but if that happens, we want to be, just careful in how we explain, but these people need to understand you. And that's my job as a parent, is to help everyone who takes care of you know what you need. And so usually this is just a processing thing your child is going through of that's a lot of information. And I don't like that other people know. There could be a little bit of, socially anxious kids could be like, don't tell people about me. But this is an evolution of helping kids know that you have to talk about what you need so that other people can help you. And so this will be a springboard later into, if they're hesitant to ask for help or email the teacher, you might have to teach them more about why they share this. And this, of course, goes into helping them understand who they can trust. No, we're not going to, maybe every family is different, but we might want not put you all over the internet as being someone and talking about all of your differences and strengths, although there are many families that children want to do that. So just follow your child's lead on that. But I always say, talking with others about your child's diagnosis is on a need-to-know basis. If you feel like other people are not going to understand your child or make assumptions about your child, they need to know how your child's brain works. And if your child doesn't know yet because they're not developmentally ready, that's okay. You will eventually bring them on board and bring them into this, what I call kind of this circle of trust of these are all of the helping people that know how your brain works and know what you're good at and know what you need help with. And then over time, you're shifting from, if you have a teenager, you're shifting from not being the one that emails all the teachers, but helping your teenager know what to do when they need to email teachers, and also speak up when they don't want help anymore. They want to be independent with that. So there are all of these, there's just an evolution over time, all of these examples that we can think of that are going to continue to evolve as your child grows. You are the expert on your kid. So, these things are not going to be better overnight. Nothing in parenting is. So just take all of this information in and absorb it through the lens of your knowledge about your child, follow that gut parent instinct, and think about what is most important to you. And if you want to keep, let me put this back up. If you want to keep learning with me, this discount will be available over the weekend. Email me with questions. I think Everett is going to put the link to this in the chat in case you need it, but you can also just go to learnwithdremily.com/parents for info on that. This has been fast, but awesome. Thank you so much to all of you who joined and all of you who are going to watch the replay. Send me an email anytime you need to or have a question or want more of things like this, and I will catch you the next time I do something like this. Or you can go to my Substack and read blogs there, or you can go to my podcast and read blogs there. All this information is on my podcast and listen. All this information is on my website. Thank you all so much for joining. Feel free to stick around if you want to type something in the chat before you hop off. And I will hopefully meet you on social media again, or here, or over on